Obviously, step one is to cut out all of the pattern pieces. I modified the arms and legs on my pattern pieces to make them a bit longer. I also changed the angle at the top of the arm so that the thumbs face upward instead of down because I think it looks better on the finished doll. I also didn't add any seam allowances. I put in the description my explanation for why I omitted them. We'll start with making the head. Mark or cut the notches where they're indicated on the paper pattern. I just make a small cut within my seam allowance. Using a straight stitch with a long length, sew along the curve from one notch to the other. You can also do this by hand. Leave long thread tails at both the beginning and the end of the stitch. Starting at one end, grab an individual thread from one of the thread tails and begin slowly pulling. The fabric will begin to gather along the edge. Don't pull too hard or too quick, or you might break the thread, which I did. So this is my second take. If that does happen, just pull out the thread and sew it again. As the fabric is gathering, adjust the gathers so they aren't all clumped in one place. Try to space them evenly along the edge. You should also probably mark the center point before you begin. I forget to do this every time I make these, so don't stress if you forget. It just really makes the process easier. Try to do half the gathers from one end and half from the other to keep them relatively even. It also reduces the tension on the thread to keep it from breaking. You should end up with this sort of like cup of fabric. Now line up the center of that back cupped piece we just made and the center of the front flat piece and pin them together. Next, pin the corners on either end, being sure to leave the neck open and unpinned. Now adjust the gathers more as needed and pin the front to the back along the edge. You don't want any really like clumpy spots in there. You want it to be all kind of evenly spaced. There should still be an opening for where the neck is going to be. Make sure you didn't pin that part closed. Now you're going to sew those two halves together along where it's pinned. After sewing it together, turn the head right side out and shape it. When you stuff the head, that will take care of some of the wrinkles, but not all of them. You can also sew it a lot more carefully than I did. All right, now we're gonna sew those super complicated feet. Line up the inner edge of the foot top. The inner edge is the side closest to the dart notch. Line that up to one edge of the leg piece and then pin that into place. Then line up the curved top edge to the bottom of the leg piece, pinning as you go. There will be a longer edge on the foot's top piece. I just cut this off after sewing and they come out just fine. I think it was originally there to make the feet tops a little more rounded. The instructions refer to the right and left feet. Just make sure that the foot top pieces are mirrored. So one will have the dart closer to the right and one has it closer to the left. And now just sew along that pinned edge. After that, you're going to close up the darts. Just fold the fabric in half, right sides together, and sew along the darts at an angle so you don't end up with a big fabric bump in there. Now you're going to fold each leg piece right side together and sew along the seam from the foot to the top. And then trim off that excess piece of fabric from the edge of the foot top. Now, for the bottoms of the feet, line up the center of the circle with the dart and pin it into place. Press the rest of the circle into the foot, lining up the edges, and pin into place. This can be a little bit tricky. Just work slowly and it'll come together, I promise. Now carefully sew around those pinned edges, which will connect the bottoms to the top. Adjust the pieces as you go to avoid sewing any wrinkles into the foot. And if you do get any wrinkles in there, don't worry too much about it. The stuffing will help even them out a little bit, just like it did with the head. Now turn the leg right side out. It'll look a little bit wonky at first, but it'll look a lot better when it's stuffed. And now with the legs done, we're going to sew the arm pieces together. You're going to want to sew slowly around the curves and especially around the little thumb parts, or you'll end up with wonky thumbs like I always do. And be sure to not close the seam at the opening of the arm. Next, we're going to sew the center seam of the front of the body together. Just place them right sides together and sew completely along that seam from top to bottom. When you sew the center seam of the back of the body together, you're just going to sew it at the top and the bottom. You're going to leave a large section in the center open. You're going to need that part to shove the arms and legs through later. And definitely leave a much bigger gap than I did. This one was a bit hard to get all the limbs through at once. Now attach the front body piece to the front of the head, right sides together, and sew it into place. Be careful not to sew the back of the head into your seam. You're going to do the exact same thing with that back piece, attaching the back body piece to the back of the head piece. Now this part's a little bit tricky. Make sure it's inside out again and sew down the neck and along the shoulder seams. Don't sew it folded like I have it here. And now it's time to stuff the arms. Make sure you turn them right side out and then just start putting the stuffing in. Do it a little bit at a time using a tool, a pencil, etc. to get it really in there. And when they're fully stuffed, you can sew the edges closed. This is optional because they'll close when you attach them to the body, but I prefer doing it beforehand because it's one less thing to wrangle. And then do the exact same thing with the legs. I made boots for mine using the foot pattern and part of the leg pattern, and it was easier to put them on before stuffing instead of trying to shove them on afterward. Now slide the arms into place between the body pieces. Sticking the hands out through the slit in the back makes the sewing process so much easier. And then sew along the sides of the body, sewing the arms in place in the process. I forgot to film this part. And then pin the legs in place, making sure that the fronts of the legs are attached to the front of the body. You might want to turn the body piece right side out when lining these up because you don't want to end up with backwards legs. And then you want to stuff the legs into the body and stick the feet out through the slit in the back where the arms are. This will make sewing the parts together so much easier. And now sew along the entire bottom edge to close that up. And then pull the arms and legs out through the slit as well as the head so that the entire doll is right side out. And then it's time to stuff the doll. Begin with the head, stuffing it super tight, and stuff the body last, and then finish it with a hidden stitch. I use a ladder stitch. I forgot to film or photograph that. And there you have it. For the clothing, I just drew around parts of the doll pattern itself and I made them slightly larger. I also combined some of the pieces, like attaching the arm pieces to the body pieces and not making separate pieces for the front and back to make a shirt. So good luck and happy sewing.